Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Always Chasing After Something. This will be Part 19, Chapter 11. Old wooden buildings were the worst to sneak through. It felt like every floorboard squeaked, no matter how evenly and gently Shoda tried to distribute his weight. He'd rather brace himself between the walls and jump forward that way. But he'd never be able to react fast enough if someone spotted him. That was why he wasn't surprised to find the flame villain waiting for him on the stairs. The villain put his phone down. 28 minutes and 15 seconds. Not bad, Eraserhead. Twice as pretty ruthless with his knots. Was that supposed to be a test? Not an official one. The villain shrugged. But I was curious. Name's Dobby, by the way. Seemed fitting for those blue flames he used. Dobby already knew his name, so Shoda didn't bother to introduce himself. This is the test. Go back to your room and wait like a good little hero until Shigaraki is ready to talk. Show me where Bakugo is first. I want to know that he's safe, Shoda said. He wouldn't stop mouthing off, so Compress put him back in a marble for a few hours. Yeah, that sounded like Bakugo, unfortunately. Shoda had never had to teach a student not to piss off their kidnappers before. That was common sense for most of them. This class was always the exception. Back to your room, Dobby ordered. Or I tell Kurogiri to send you to Sensei. Well, that would certainly hinder all of his plans. Shoda reluctantly turned and went back to the room he came from. Dobby didn't follow him, and Shoda shut the door himself. There was nothing more degrading than closing the door of your own cage. So be it. Plan A failed. Time for Plan B. His phone had been destroyed, but there had to be a way to get a message out somehow. The window was painted black and boarded up for good measure. Breaking it would summon every villain in the bar and earn him a one-way ticket to All for One. The only thing in this room was the unmade bed. He couldn't even find a hidden camera. Not that he'd know what to do with one if he did. Hacking wasn't his thing, and he doubted a tiny camera would be much help anyway. But this wasn't the only room on this floor. He gave Dobby 10 minutes to grow bored before sneaking out again and trying different doors. One was a storage closet with blankets and pillows. 2 doors were locked, and he debated the merits of picking the lock and moving on. The 4th door he tried was open. Another bedroom, this one occupied by Shigaraki himself. His bed was a mess, sheets and frayed blankets in a disarray, half on the floor. The dismembered hands he wore sat on a shelf beside the door, lined up neatly. A trash can under the shelf overflowed with chip bags and crushed soda cans. On one wall, a large TV displayed some first-person shooter game. Shigaraki sat backwards on a rolling desk chair, pinkies lifted up from the controller in his hands. Dobby told you to stay put, he said, not looking over from his game. I was bored. There's nothing to do in there. Shigaraki snorted. You wanted to find your little student and run off, don't lie. Of course he did. You heroes are so predictable, like the same cutscene over and over again. Shoda glanced at the screen. Video games must be pretty important to him. Maybe he could use that. Do you have an extra controller? The chair creaked when Shigaraki turned to stare at him. On screen, his character was shot and killed. You want to play? Shrugging, Shoda stepped further into the room. Like I said, I'm bored. And you want something unpredictable, right? He'd never played video games in his life, even when Hisashi and Namuri tried to rope him into something. He always refused. Watching was entertaining enough. Shigaraki laughed and fished out a second controller. While Shoda got used to what it felt like, Shigaraki set up a 2-player game. Have you played before? No. There were indents right under his fingers where the plastic had been worn away by Shigaraki's quirk. The game loaded, and Shigaraki flew through an explanation of what each button did. He seemed excited to have someone to play with and didn't even mind when Shoda epically failed 10 seconds into the game. Actually, he thought the way Shoda guided his little character off a roof was hilarious. You're really bad at this, Shigaraki giggled. He gunned down an opposing team and picked up some kind of ammo. Shoda was still stuck on the roof. Jumping down got him killed, but there were no stairs. How else was he supposed to get down? The only door he could find was locked. Go to the door and hit Y, Shigaraki instructed. Spinning a few times to find the door, Shoda did what he said. The door opened, revealing stairs down to the lower levels. Is that the button to pick locks? Shigaraki giggled again. Noob, that picks things up or opens doors. The door hadn't actually been locked then. Shoda was just so bad he didn't know how to open them. Watch out for the ambush, Shigaraki said, making no effort to come help him as he continued to race through the playing field. Shoda managed to get a gun in his hands before leaving the stairs. He even fired a few shots. Each virtual bullet hit the wall. His opponents had better aim, and he died again, coming back to life on the roof once more. You're so bad at this, it's funny, Shigaraki said. Why'd you want to play? Shoda shrugged. Trying to understand you. Pass some time. He died again in the ambush, but he managed to successfully hit one of his opponents. You're really not like other heroes, are you? Shigaraki asked. All Might would never play with me. He'd just smash everything. That was more or less true. If All Might approached him in his skinny form outside of a combat scenario, then he might have asked to play. But all buffed up and ready to knock heads, Shigaraki would have stood no chance. Is that good or bad? Shoda asked. His third attempt with the ambush did not fare much better. He was learning where the men waited for him, but it didn't change the fact that they'd already shot him before he remembered which button was the trigger. Good. It means you might be willing to join us after all. Not a snowball's chance in hell, but Shoda would let him believe whatever he wanted if it kept him and Bakugo alive. You still haven't given me any reason to. What is it you and the League are trying to accomplish? We want to kill All Might and destroy society, Shigaraki said, gleefully spraying bullets from a balcony to a whole team of enemy characters below him. Shoda hit a wince. To what end? Because I hate them, and Sensei said I can destroy whatever I don't like. He sounded like a spoiled toddler. Rather than berating that line of thinking, which would get him nowhere good, Shoda tried to come at this like a teacher and find the root of the problem. Why do you hate them? All Might makes people feel safe. They walk around smiling like sheep, not worried about anything. They have no idea how fast their lives could be ruined, and it pisses me off. Shoda learned how to roll in the game and lasted 5 whole seconds longer in the ambush. So, you hate heroes in society because people feel safe. Talk about a backwards way of thinking. Safe people don't look past their own nose, Shigaraki went on. Someone could beg for help right in front of them, and they'll just smile and keep walking like they never saw. He had a hard time imagining anyone walking past a stranger bleeding out and not doing anything about it, but maybe that spoke of the different worlds they came from. Did that happen to you? Shoda risked asking. Shigaraki didn't answer at first. He looted a virtual corpse, stealing ammo and provisions. Yeah. My quirk killed my whole family when it activated and destroyed my house, and no one would help. I wandered the streets for days before Sensei offered to take me in as his own. Shoda had not expected to learn Shigaraki's tragic backstory. He hadn't wanted to learn Shigaraki's tragic backstory, because now Shigaraki sounded like someone who needed help, and not someone Shoda could just knock out and drag to jail. This complicated things. If it was a quirk activation, Shigaraki couldn't have been very old, 5 or 6 at most. To have spent that much time with All for One, learning to think the way that supervillain did, it was one of the worst cases of grooming Shoda had ever seen. And now he needed to decide if the conditioning Shigaraki went through excused him of his actions, or if Shigaraki should still be held accountable for his own choices. If he'd never learned differently, was anything Shigaraki did his own fault, or only a result of his training? His mind raced with all this new information. He didn't know what to do with it all. So, are you going to join our party now? Shigaraki asked. You agree that society is messed up, right? We need to destroy it all and start over. No, Shoda did not agree. Not at all. But he understood, and that made a world of difference. Maybe it does need to change, but don't you think you could accomplish that without killing heroes? No one will be willing to change as long as their heroes continue to blind them. That's why we have to start with All Might. Take out the pillar, and the whole thing will collapse. You're not wrong, Shoda said. All Might had been a symbol for almost 3 decades, longer than most hero careers even lasted. Retirement was around the corner for him, but he'd been pushing it off as long as possible because villains were going to take advantage of his absence. If All Might were to be taken out by villains, though, and not retire peacefully, anarchy. The world would be in chaos. That had to be avoided at any cost. Shoda had his capture scarf right now. He even had a knife at his back. He could take care of Shigaraki right now, put an end to the League once and for all. But what would happen to Bakugo and Ragdoll if he did? Bakugo might make it out unscathed, but Ragdoll would be dead before he even found her. And that was assuming Kurogiri didn't warp him right in front of All for One, and the supervillain didn't kill him where he stood. Are you still stuck in that ambush? Shigaraki asked. The ambush had killed him at least 8 times. Shoda grimaced. Wow, okay, hang on. Shigaraki turned around on the field. Coming back for Shoda, maybe? Shoda had no idea where their characters were in relation to each other. Shigaraki did come to help Shoda through the ambush and continued to play virtual bodyguard while they moved through the game. Since the ambush had now been cleared, when Shoda came back to life on that rooftop, they were no longer there when he went down. They played for about 20 minutes, their only conversation about the game, before Shoda decided to push his luck with his questions. Last week, when you attacked my student at the mall, there was another boy there. You seemed to know him. Shigaraki hummed. Yeah, 84 lived with me and Sensei for a few years. He was one of Sensei's and Doc's favorite subjects because of how well he handled their experiments. They gave him privileges the others didn't get, like sleeping in a real bed when he behaved. Shoda's stomach twisted. Beds shouldn't be a privilege. No one else was ever around to play with me, so I made 84 play. He was a great player, too. Good enough to keep up with me, but not good enough to beat me most of the time. Shoda was willing to bet Izuku deliberately didn't win for fear of the consequences. What happened to him? All Might, Shigaraki snarled. He smashed our old place, and 84 disappeared in the chaos. We all thought he was dead until I ran into him at the mall. I just had to say hi. Your student was too close. I didn't really care about her. But she'd have gone running off for the heroes if I let her go. Well, at least there was nothing personal against Uraraka. That was one concern off the tail end of his list of current problems. It hadn't even been on the list until he crossed it off. But you know what I want to know, Shigaraki started. What was 84 doing with your student in the first place? One would assume shopping. It was a mall, wasn't it? Shigaraki's character shot Shoda in the back. Don't get smart. You know more about 84 than you're letting on. He had to tell him something. An edited version of the truth should suffice. I happened to run into him bleeding out in an alley one night. He was in trouble, so I took him in for a few days. Couldn't trust him alone at home, so he came to class a few times. And my students bonded with him. They invited him to the mall. That sounded normal, right? Nothing about Izuku's alter ego in that. So, you know where he is then? Shigaraki asked. Sensei is dying to have him back. He ran off with a quirk that didn't belong to him. It sure as hell belonged to the kid now. He ran off the day you attacked the mall. I haven't seen him since. Figures, Shigaraki muttered. Internally, Shoda melted with relief. That had been an outright lie, and he'd been praying Shigaraki wouldn't catch on. It didn't seem like Shigaraki had even questioned it. Thank goodness. I'm bored with this, Shigaraki declared, quitting the game out of nowhere. Go back to your room. Shoda was all but shoved out the door, head still spinning from that conversation. He returned to his room so he could process it all and decide where he went from there. This lasted for 10 minutes before he remembered where he was and that he didn't have time to meditate about his problems. He needed to act. Kurogiri met him downstairs, cleaning the bar. A glass with a marble in it sat on the bar top, clearly guarded by the warp villain. Thirsty? Kurogiri asked. Yeah, Shoda said, coming closer. He didn't know where the other villains were. If he used his quirk, could he grab Bakugo and make a run for it? But how would he get him out of the marble? What were the limits for Compress's quirk? If the villain needed to be present to undo the marble, leaving might be too risky. Then he'd have to track Compress down again and force him to fix his student. No, he couldn't just run off. Not when he didn't know how that would affect his student. As long as Bakugo was stuck in a marble, Shoda was stuck in this bar. Kurogiri set a fresh cup of jasmine tea down. Jasmine was Shoda's preferred tea flavor, and he wondered if Kurogiri had known that, or taken a lucky guess. Who knew what the villains knew about him at this point, though he doubted his tea preferences were easy to find. Shoda sipped at it. A tablespoon of honey had been stirred in already, the exact amount Shoda liked. Now it was just creepy, he decided. How do you know how I take my tea? He demanded. Kurogiri paused, the tea box still in his hands. Is that not how everyone takes jasmine tea? It's how I've always prepared it for young Tomura Shigaraki. Huh. Must be a coincidence. He hated coincidences. They were suspicious. He didn't like having anything in common with Shigaraki either, even something as benign as their tea preferences. Kurogiri put the tea box away and picked up a rag to wipe the counters down again. How long have you been making tea for Shigaraki? Shoda asked. Kurogiri gave off strong butler vibes, and he was curious how committed the warp villain was to the cause. Was it just a job to him, or did he really believe in their goals? As long as I can remember, Kurogiri said. Master created me to assist Tomura Shigaraki. Shoda almost spat out his tea. Of course, that was why the investigation never found records of anyone with a warp quirk, All for One and his crazy doctor created it. Kurogiri had been an experiment. Was this what they'd wanted to turn Izuku into? Minus all the misty warp quirk stuff, but some kind of obedient, kick-ass servant. Imagining Izuku as obedient made him want to laugh. That kid was contrary by nature, fueled by spite and pettiness 90% of the time. What had this man been like before he was turned into this? Was anything of Kurogiri part of his original personality? He might need to drink something stronger than tea. That alcohol behind the villain was starting to look pretty tempting. And Shoda didn't even drink. Shoda needed to stop talking to people. His brain could not handle another earth-shattering revelation, especially the slowly churning thought in the back of his mind that so far, the two main figureheads of the League of Villains were both victims, in their own right. What else would he find if he dug deeper? He drained the rest of his tea like a shot and asked for coffee. Until he and Bakugo and hopefully Ragdoll, if it wasn't too late, were all back home, sleep was a foreign concept. Kurogiri brewed a fresh pot and left it within easy reach of Shoda. All right, listeners, this concludes the first half to Chapter 11 of Always Chasing After Something. The second half to this chapter will be up next. For myself, personally, I love this chapter. Well, I love the fic altogether, but I really like this chapter because Aizawa's being put through the metaphorical ringer, right? With revelation after revelation, seeing the dual-sidedness to some of the League of Villains, right? And how Shigaraki and Kurogiri, calling them victims in their own right. And how this plays a factor, right, in the moral compass that Shoda carries. So a lot of cool elements here, as well as some more revelations, too, about Izuku's past. We're getting more and more each time as that unsurfaces, and also a bit of how Aizawa's put in this position, too, where he can't leave the bar. He's had multiple ideas running through his mind. Ultimately, though, his priority is Ragdoll and Bakugo, and so long as they're at risk, he's not making any moves to get out of there. It's really interesting that this is taking place. So drop your comments for me. Let me know what you're thinking. Just a reminder, as always, that the fic is located over on AO3, so you can always slide over leaving comments, kudos, and support to the original author as well. I'm sure it's much appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.